X-Men Apocalypse. What's going on, guys? I am back. I'm riding solo today. I'm here to talk to you about, obviously, X-Men Apocalypse. So, as you all know, I'm still late on this shit yet again, but the house is coming along, and so, yeah, here I am seeing an X-Men Apocalypse like a week and a half late and giving it to you completely on time. Also want to let you guys know, stay tuned at the end of this video because there will be a very exciting announcement for any and all of our subscribers. But let's get right into this shit. So, X-Men Apocalypse, the third one following Days of Future Past. Bryan Singer's at the reins again, and this time the movie is not being as well received critically as Days of Future Past was. So why is that? Did I enjoy the movie? Did you guys, more importantly, did you guys enjoy the movie? Let me know in the comments below, but I'm going to tell you what I thought about it. I enjoyed this movie, but again, I went in with very low expectations because I wasn't hearing very good things. So I came out actually pleasantly surprised. But another thing is that the trailers for this movie didn't really grab me that much, so I really didn't feel hyped and pumped to go see it, hence why I didn't go see it opening night or even opening weekend. I was busy, and I thought, I'm not even going to try and carve out time for this movie. I'll see it when I see it. My loyal 40-some YouTube listeners I have will just have to wait because I like to torture you guys. I do appreciate all the views that we do get, so let's get right into this. The cinematography of this film was the first thing that I noticed that really separated this from the last few Bryan Singer X-Men films. The cinematography for this just did not feel as grounded in realism, and that's because that this movie is really more fantastical than all of the other X-Men films so far. I mean, barring a little bit of the future sequences in Days of Future Past, this is really the most fantastical X-Men film we've gotten thus far. And one of the very first times I noticed this was when we were dolling back up the pyramid in the very beginning in Egypt. You know, we'd never really seen camera movement like that before, and the camera movement was like that in a lot of different areas, but that was just kind of one symptomatic place that I was able to nail down here. So yeah, the cinematography in this film, it just really wasn't up to par. I have not even gone and looked up who the director of photography was, but can't be the same person as the last few Singer films. This camera movement's kind of erratic. It doesn't make sense. It's really not good at framing the actors. And, you know, it's not really sending much of a message. It just seems to kind of be haphazardly thrown together in what they thought looked like cool scenes. Flashback to ancient Egypt. It really took me out of the film because I didn't think ancient Egypt, or even modern day Egypt was convincing. It didn't look like authentic Egypt. To me, it looked very much like a stage that was built for a movie. I don't think that they filmed this on location. If they did, I'm sorry, Egypt, you're not exactly what I thought you were, but I think it's safe to bet that they did not film this on location in Egypt. And that really took me out of the movie because, like I said, I've kind of come to expect these X-Men films to be grounded a little bit more because that's how they started off. I mean, the first X-Men film is so strong because it does feel like it's set in a very modern-day America. So Egypt not looking authentic, it just didn't really do it for me, and it really took me out of all of the apocalypse scenes that had to do with Egypt. Now, I know you guys are going to hear a lot of different stuff about Apocalypse and about how he was underwhelming and how he was one-dimensional, one-note, blah, blah, blah. He wasn't menacing, he was too short, all this bullshit. Yes, it's all correct. But the biggest problem here is that Apocalypse was just uninteresting. His parts and his scenes were just not fun to watch. I know some people say different. This is just my one humble opinion, which is always correct, by the way. But Apocalypse was just uninteresting. His origin I found uninteresting. The four ancient horsemen I thought were kind of cool, but the acting was not very good. I just did not feel invested when he comes out in the cloak and he's talking to Storm and he's showing off his powers and he's looking around modern day Egypt. He's sitting there looking around and I'm sitting there like, yeah, dude, you're looking at a fake ass Egypt. That doesn't look real to me at all. And you know, he's displaying his powers and all that nonsense. And then he looks at the television like Ultron and Age of Ultron, getting all of his information about the modern day world and the false idols and the false gods nonsense. You know, I was just like, okay, let's move on from this because I found that the X-Men introductions, like the introductions to Cyclops and Jean, those were much more interesting for me to watch. Those reminded me a little bit more of the First Class, the tone of First Class, the feel of First Class, and it reminded me a little bit more of the original X-Men. It was fun to see these characters back when they were younger, before we got to know them in the 2000 X-Men. Which brings me to Jennifer Lawrence's Mystique. Now, I've never really been on board with her as Mystique at all. She's just always been kind of there for me. I thought Days of Future Past was definitely her best outing as Mystique, but don't let anybody tell you that Jennifer Lawrence did not phone this fucking performance in. Now, I have no problem with Jennifer Lawrence. I find her very compelling as an actress. She's a very attractive woman. She's probably one of the best actresses in Hollywood right now. But the thing is, she's so disinterested in being in this franchise anymore that you can just tell there's probably not a good back and forth between her and Singer. Every time they film something with her, it was probably something like, okay, we got it, let's move on, we don't need to do another take. That was probably Singer like, I'm not going to even fight this chick, let's just move on. And it's very evident when her and Nicholas Hoult, the actor who portrays Beast, used to have a romance between each other. And you can see that in their first exchange when they see each other again, she just does not want to be there. Now, if you guys didn't notice this, and now you're listening to this and you see this again, I promise you will pick up on this. But she just does not want any part of that exchange. She just wants to get the hell out of there. It was an uncomfortable scene to watch, and I didn't even think about it's uncomfortable to watch because they used to date. I was reminded of that during the scene. I didn't go in there thinking, oh yeah, they used to date. I was reminded of it because of that scene, because I was taken out of it so much by Jennifer Lawrence's performance. Hopefully she is not in this franchise anymore. I don't want to see her as Mystique anymore. I don't even want to see Mystique anymore. I'm over Mystique. She's not that compelling of a character, especially when you don't even acknowledge the fact that Nightcrawler is her son. So can we please just get Jennifer Lawrence out of there and replace her with somebody else, or just kill off Mystique in general? Like, she has a cool fucking power, don't get me wrong, but there's really not a whole lot more to do with this character. Now, when it comes to the actresses in this film, other than Jennifer Lawrence, we have newcomers Sophie Turner and Alexandra Shipp, I think it is, who plays Storm. Sophie Turner, at the beginning I could tell she was having a hard time hiding her English accent, but maybe that was also me projecting a little bit because I'm so used to seeing her as Sansa Stark from Game of Thrones. I don't know, but I felt like, why am I hearing bits of maybe an English accent, but then it's gone? But later on in the film, she seems to get more of a handle on it, and I'm okay with it. But Alexandra Shipp and her, I guess it's Egyptian accent, I always thought she was from Africa, but her accent was really hard to watch, and I actually don't really think she did a great job as Storm. I'm excited to see Storm grow into the Storm that we know from the comic books, but I wasn't really that thrilled with her performance in general. It felt a little bit like overacting. It felt like Singer really didn't have a tightest grip on the reins of this movie as he has in the past. And part of me thinks that is partially due to the fact that this movie takes place in the 80s, which I find odd because Singer's bread and butter are 80s films. Now, no one's really talking about this, and I think maybe it's not really registering with a lot of audience members and critics, but I think because this movie takes place in the 80s, Singer felt he can get away with making this an 80s styled film. And if you really go back and watch, this movie does feel like an 80s styled film. It has a lot of those 80s cliches. It has a lot of those 80s cheesy moments. When you're talking about those kinds of things, I'm talking about like a camera staying too long on somebody's cool stance, very comic book pose kind of thing. We got that a lot, especially towards the very end, the last shot, when we get a one shot on each one of the characters of the new X-Men team about ready to fight the Sentinels in the Danger Room, which was a cool ending, but it took me out of it a little bit again just because it felt so cheesy and 80s to just get like a one shot of each character like gearing up for like, let's do this, we're gonna fuck up these Sentinels, motherfucker. There were other moments of that too, especially Nightcrawler in the pyramid looking to get Professor X out of the pyramid when they're, in the third act. There's a lot of moments where I think he's just kind of standing there in this maze, and he just looks like, Singer went for a tableau that, like, hopefully people will think, oh, this kind of looks like a comic book panel or a comic book cover. But is this movie really suffering due to Bryan Singer? Now, I know a lot of the fans and a lot of people are talking about, like, let's get Bryan Singer out of this. We appreciate that you started off this kind of comic book renaissance, but, let's get out of there, because now that we've seen things like Civil War and the Marvel Universe develop, and Deadpool even, everyone's just kind of like, your shit's outdated. You're kind of making dramas that happen to have superheroes in them, which it's true. And, if you really look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe formula, they're doing the same thing. They kind of make genre films that just happen to have superheroes in them, especially since Phase 2 is kicked off and Winter Soldier is kind of a spy thriller. Civil War is a man on the run kind of thriller. But I don't know if I can fully fault Bryan Singer for this movie. It seems like he's trying to make up for, fan complaints in the past, but again, he's also kind of he has to stick with his roots because he did start the X-Men. He can't just up and change them dramatically, which I know everybody wants, and which is why everyone's just crying for a reboot, and that's fine. But another question we really need to ask ourselves is this movie too much fan service? Because think of one of the most main complaints all fans seem to have about these X-Men films. Wolverine. It's all about Wolverine. It's fucking Wolverine movies. I've had 5 fucking Wolverine movies, blah, blah, blah. So, sounds like he heard your guys' cry, and he didn't make Wolverine the center of the film. So there's no central character in this film at all. And I think that's partially where this movie starts to suffer in its critical reception, is that we don't have a voyeur look into the world of the X-Men the way we had Wolverine, and we learn about the X-Men through Wolverine's eyes. We don't have that in this movie, so nobody really stands out and shines, and there's no character to follow in this film, so no one even has a standout performance. And I will say that Fassbender and McAvoy have both turned in great performances again, but you can't help but almost forget about their performances because there are so many characters introduced. And so I think that's one of the inherent fallacies of the X-Men comics in general. The reason they work as comic books is because you can tell endless stories with these characters, but as a movie, as a isolated 2.5 hour or 2 hour film, you have to have a central character to navigate this film, and we don't have that. The closest we got might actually be Scott Summers as Cyclops, which, you know what, Ty Sheridan, you did a great job, buddy. I mean, hats off to you. I liked you as Cyclops more than I liked James Marsden because he was kind of wooden, so Bryan Singer definitely made up for that complaint, and he made up for not making this a Wolverine movie, but that also partially brought it down because now we don't have a real protagonist to follow through the film. We do have an antagonist, sort of. It's Apocalypse, which I'm not even going to talk that much about. I know the movie's titled Apocalypse, but he was just so uninteresting, and there's really not a whole lot I'm going to say about him that you guys probably haven't heard 100 times in 100 other reviews, so I'm just not even going to worry about him. Yes, the third act was a complete mess, and it was boring. What else can you say? It's been said 100 times. The first 2/3 of this movie are actually very entertaining, and even though you don't really have one character to follow, you enjoy following the different characters and seeing how they all come together. But I will say about the third act of this movie, and it wasn't even in just the third act, it's just the third act was the most offensive culprit of it all, was these X-Men films really need to step up their stunt work and CGI and wire work. I mean, good God. After Civil War, you really got to step up the ante when it comes to action. And the wire work on this was just so apparent. I mean, anytime you saw Magneto floating in the air, you could just tell his suit was rising up to his neck and chin a little bit, and you knew it just looked uncomfortable. Same with Storm, Beast and Psylocke fighting each other. It was just a lot of wire work and really, really bad CGI. Let's talk about bad CGI. Okay, when they're fighting in the mind, and Apocalypse versus Xavier, and Apocalypse is just this giant son of a bitch, that is horrible CGI. I mean, noticeably and laughably bad. Same thing when you see all the crates in that shipyard turned over. That is straight up CGI. I knew that was not an actual shipping yard. No fucking way. I mean, come on. It's 2016. We have the technology. Where is your budget going in an action film like this if it is not being sunk into your CGI in action? And this movie does have a lot of positives. Like I said, Ty Sheridan and his introduction to Cyclops, there was a reason that we got the introduction to Cyclops. We didn't really get Nightcrawler's introduction about how he becomes his mutant or gets his mutant abilities. We don't get Jean, how does she get hers? We got Cyclops, and that's because this guy going forward will be the leader of the X-Men. And we got a great taste of that because after his brother Havoc is supposedly killed, now there's a rule in film that if a character dies off screen and there's no body, chances are that character's not actually dead. I would have been fine had they killed off Havoc because I'm sorry, Lucas Till is just not a very good actor. I just kind of cringe at his line delivery. But killing him off like this, it's somewhat kind of retcons the origins and the dynamic between the two brothers because Scott is supposed to be older than Alex and he's supposed to feel guilty about Alex supposedly being dead and it being his fault, so we may see that play out in the future, but I'd be fine with leaving that guy dead. I just don't really want to see Lucas Till come back as Havoc. He had one cool scene and it was honestly still a little weird to me anyway. Nightcrawler was awesome. I didn't actually miss Alan Cummings. I was like, this kid from Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, whatever his name is, did a great job as Nightcrawler, and he was actually a little bit more of the comedic relief, which he should be. Nightcrawler, as much as he is kind of that Bible-thumping believer, he's also funny. He's a fun character, and that's another thing I think Singer did too, is he injected some more humor into this. Now, it didn't always land. There were some Thor the Dark World moments where the humor really kind of took away from the stakes, but Nightcrawler himself, he was done well. I loved seeing him bamf around, and we got to see his teleportation, him against Angel in the cage match rematch was kind of cool, and then we get to see them, duke it out again, their rematch. That was pretty cool too. And let's not even lie to ourselves, guys. You can hate this movie, you can love this movie, but I really think there is no denying that this is the best X-Men lineup of any X-Men film thus far. I mean, this is a great lineup, and yeah, maybe they weren't all good guys and blah blah blah, but I will say that at the end, when everyone kind of teams up on Apocalypse and uses their powers against him, that was really the first time we'd seen them all use their powers to defeat one guy like this. As cheesy as it might have been, at the same time, like, finally, everyone is pitching in to fucking take out Mr. Big Bad Guy. There was a lot of shit that probably could have been taken out of this film. There were moments where it's like Singer's trying to show everybody the grand scale of this film, like the world is gonna end. So we get shots of guys on a boat as water's coming up in the air, and we're getting shots in the Pentagon or wherever it is in DC, and just people, bystanders and shit. Like, we don't need to see that. We have 20 fucking mutants on screen at all times. Let's just isolate the story a little bit. We can understand that the stakes are big. This is Apocalypse. The guy's going to destroy the world. What I think they really should have done, though, with Apocalypse's motivation was, instead of making it a throwaway line about how he wants to cleanse the earth and survival of the fittest, and whoever survives, we will rebuild the world. Admittedly, the only Apocalypse story I've ever read is Age of Apocalypse. I have all 4 volumes of all the tie-ins in the comics, and it is a hefty read, to say the least. But at the same time, we really understand what Apocalypse is going for. He's culling all of the weak mutants and trying to keep the DNA pure and strong, and breed strong mutants to carry their race forward. That should have been made a little bit more clear, but instead we just kind of see him recruiting people. Now, let's get to the part that everyone seems to love talking about, because he was such a surprise in Days of Future Past, even though everybody seemed to jump the gun about hating his costume. The Quicksilver scene, right? Did X-Men Apocalypse trump the Days of Future Past Quicksilver scene? And my opinion is no, they did not. I thought the scene was cool. It was a lot of fun to watch, sure, but at the same time, it was during a point in the movie where the stakes were so high. Professor X was just kidnapped and their mansion is being blown up, and then the next thing I know is I'm kind of laughing and giggling at this dog with pizza in its mouth, and Quicksilver's running to "Sweet dreams are made of these," and I'm sitting there thinking, well, that kind of came at an odd time. I get that Quicksilver just kind of comes in and saves everybody, which is cool, but it was kind of the Thor the Dark World treatment, in the sense that Thor's going head to head with fucking Malekith, and it's a pretty sweet action scene, and the next thing I know is he's hopping a train to Greenwich, and women are groping him on the fucking train. That really detracts from the stakes that are happening. It really doesn't heighten the fucking film at all. It really brings me down. Quicksilver's sitting there and he's making a joke out of all this, and the next thing I know is, oh yeah, Havoc's dead. Well, that didn't really land for me at all. Why didn't it land for me? Because I'm sitting there still kind of reeling over the fact that Quicksilver just saved all these guys in a really funny fashion, so now Havoc's dead and I don't seem to give a shit. There are a couple scenes like that in this film, and I don't really understand why they would put that in there. I mean, I'm thinking that this movie probably got cut up a lot more than what we saw, because Psylocke was even kind of reduced to an ancillary character, and she really had nothing to do. And as cool as it was to see Caliban, the Morlocks, and things like that, which, is that where your fucking CGI went, was to do his eyes? Because his eyes look cool as shit. But how come the rest of the CGI in that movie didn't look cool? I don't fucking get it. Psylocke really just had nothing to do in this film. She looked okay in her outfit, which everyone wants to bitch about her outfit not being practical. Who gives a shit? It's Olivia Munn showing a lot of ass and leg. I'm not gonna fucking complain. Her role was just kind of reduced to nothingness, and I don't really care about that either, because Psylocke, other than playing her as a character in Super Nintendo, is not a character I've ever really been that invested in anyway. I just always thought she was hot. Hats off, Olivia Munn, you pulled that off. But going back to Quicksilver, as funny as that scene was, and as funny as some of his parts are, like, we don't know, bro! I was starting to get the idea that Quicksilver might be some kind of an idiot savant. He may be kind of a smartass, but his smartass seems to be unwittingly smartass, almost like he's got some form of autism or something. Now, don't get pissed off at me saying that, but the thing is, he seems kind of unaware that he's funny. The things that he says, the inappropriate timing of some of the shit that he says, he doesn't realize that he's making a joke. He's like, oh, you laughed at that. Oh, it must have been funny then. And I thought that was kind of odd, because we saw it a little bit in Days of Future Past, where he's just kind of whimsical, I guess, and a little bit unaware of what was going on. But now that he seems to be very focused and have a goal in this film, it's played up even more, and I didn't really understand. So is this guy kind of a Rain Man deal? What's going on? I don't really know if he movie is all there in the head, which I don't know if that was a conscious decision to do by Evan Peters or Singer, or it just really didn't realize that that's how it was coming across. That's how it came across for me. The last thing I'm going to touch on is Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Now, a lot of people were talking about this scene and how unnecessary it was, and it was ham-fisted and blah, 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 blah. Now, when you go back and think about it, yeah, I guess it really served no real purpose, but in the movie, you're not sitting there consciously thinking, why the fuck am I at Alkali Lake right now? You know, you just go along for the ride, you're fine with it. But the thing for me is that I think that this scene, this particular sequence and scene, was kind of an afterthought. It was probably added in later. And the reason I say that is because Hugh Jackman doesn't seem to be in the shape that he's usually in. Now, am I saying he's a fat ass? Hell no. I mean, the guy's in phenomenal shape at all times. But you can tell if you go back and watch the film that he's not in the shape that he's usually in for these X-Men films. Almost like they said 2 weeks before I started shooting, like, hey, will you come in? We're going to shoot a couple things with you. You know, we're going to do a Weapon X thing. As cool as the Weapon X nod to the comics was, it didn't feel earned. It didn't feel like an organic piece of the movie at some point because it was so built up. It was very tongue-in-cheek. There's some kind of animal in there. There's some kind of feral weapon in there. And I was just like, okay, we get it. Like, I understand you're a little tongue-in-cheek, you're a little not, like, we get it. Wolverine's in there. You fucking advertised it. Had you not advertised it in the trailer, maybe I would have been like, oh no shit, Wolverine. But we all knew it was coming. As cool as it looked, and as good as we finally got a good berserker rage scene out of Wolverine, it just didn't land for me. It was just not placed well in the film. But the one thing I did like is that Jean is the one that gives him some semblance of his memory back, that it kind of brings him back from his feral berserker rage. And I think because we never really understood why Logan had such an infatuation with Jean in the original X-Men films, now we can maybe understand that he can feel her touch inside his mind, and when he sees her again, you know, as an older woman, now we can kind of get the sense that Jean touched him and gave him his memory back just enough to, you know, bring him back down and level him out. And as funny as it was to kind of watch him clumsily run off into the snow, I think you could have probably cut about 3 seconds, you know, before that. That was just kind of awkward to look at. But all in all, I did not hate X-Men Apocalypse because I didn't go in with super high expectations. I came out pleasantly surprised. Are there problems with this film? Absolutely. Are there flaws just like any other film? Of course. Is this the worst Singer X-Men film made? Yes. Yes, it is. But it's not the worst X-Men film ever made. So, you know, keep that in mind. I think that they still have a strong enough platform to move forward. Is Singer the right guy? I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what happened here. I mean, obviously the script wasn't in tip-top shape, so you can't really fault Singer for that too much. I don't know how much of this shit was cut down. We'll see what happens when the Blu-ray is released and we get, you know, the extended cut and deleted scenes and all that nonsense. But if I had to rank this movie, I'd rank it, you know, right under First Class probably. I like Days of Future Past better than First Class. Actually, I don't even think First Class is that great. Fucking shoot me. What I did want to say to you, all my loyal listeners and subscribers, is that we are having something very fun. For our first 1,000 subscribers, you guys are entered into a chance to win a very fun little collectible thing. Again, don't make your subscriptions private or we can't see you as a subscriber. When we finally hit that 1,000 subscriber mark, we are going to do a giveaway randomly for our first 1,000 subscribers. So, guys, if you liked what I had to say here, if you found it funny, if you hated me, if you disagreed, if you liked it, feel free to tell me in the comments below. Like this comment, share the video, subscribe, comment, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. You know what to do, guys. It's been long enough. Thanks for listening, and hopefully I will be back very soon with something new for you guys, because since the house is finally starting to come together, and I'm not putting too much time into it anymore, I can probably give you more of this shit if you like it enough. That's all I got for you guys. You take care, True Relievers.